Yeah.
Okay, started the recording.
All right, good. We have a quorum. So Freddie, can you hear us?
Yeah, I
Okay,
still don't get invited to the meetings for Zoom links.
I'll bring it up with Jay again. I'm pretty sure I brought it up before, but I'll bring it up again.
Thank,
Kevin, do you get it?
Yes, I'm getting them now. Thank you.
Okay.
okay, and Bill, you're getting them?
I am not.
Okay,
I'm not either, but it's been working for me to just enter and be promoted.
all right. Are we ready to start? James is not going to be with us tonight because he has a really bad cold. So this is the St. Mark Street Park Working Group. We are meeting on the 15th of September. It is 7:05 p.m. I would like to table the review and approve the minutes for the meetings of July 28, August 4, August 25, if that's all right with everyone. Since James is not with us and I'm not sure those minutes are done. Does anybody have an issue with tabling?
Sorry, James sent out the minutes of the 28th, July 28th, this
Mhm.
afternoon at 3:30. So I mean, I don't know if anyone else has had a chance to read them. I did.
Okay, I didn't.
Okay,
So if that's okay, we can just hold off on that.
fine with me. Yep.
All right.
I think that's fine with me, Marguerite, as well. I'm not sure they looked complete to me. I thought that was the meeting in which we had Michael Clutchman join us, and I didn't see anything about his presence there. But the only thing I'm concerned about delaying it is, there is the rule of 45 days, I think, for to get meeting minutes in. So I just want to make sure that we're in compliance with that.
Yes, and 45 days, as long as we send, if we can send a draft and have the draft posted as a draft if we need to. I will talk to Kate Battles about that. She's been very, sort of our go-to person on that, and I'll ask her if she would prefer a rough draft posted that no one has looked at, or if she'd just rather that we waited. So I will.
Okay, great. So
I will
other than
do
that, I'm fine with tabling it. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Do we need to vote on tabling minutes, Andrew?
I don't think so.
I don't
Now,
think
also, just was the July 28th meeting, was that the meeting in which Michael Kluckman appeared, or was that an earlier? That was like August 23rd, right?
Yeah.
I thought July, I thought these minutes,
All right.
I just had some minor comments on them.
On the edits of those, well, I think I haven't read them,
Okay,
so I think that sort of makes this my fault. Yes, I think Mr. Clutchman spoke to us on the 28th of July, I have down. No. I have down that it was the 25th of August. Well,
Yeah.
clearly, I don't know which happened where. So I'll talk to Kate Battles about that, and if we're in desperate non-compliance, I will ask her to just post the rough draft just to give us a placeholder until we can do it, if that's okay with everybody.
can I suggest,
Yes,
I prefer not to post. I'd rather be late on submitting minutes than not post.
Yeah, I hear you. Absolutely. Yep.
And, the state law is like 6 months. So I know we have a town mandate, but if you're going to post something that we haven't reviewed and discussed, I want
Mhm.
really big notice that the committee hasn't, the working group hasn't discussed these or reviewed them. They're,
Right.
because what happens is once you put something public like that, people read it, and then that becomes, if there's something that's a mistake, that becomes people's knowledge. So
Understood. All right.
think
I
it's
will discuss
dangerous
this
to
with
do
Kate.
that.
All right. Good. Thanks. Okay, so as far as that goes, item number 1 tabled. Item number 2 on the agenda is public comment. Do we have members of the public who would like to speak? And I see we have several hands, but no hands raised. Anybody want to speak? No? All right. I'm not seeing any raised hands. Okay. So the first agenda item was supposed to be number 3, which is the update from Andrew about the ongoing working group charge. Andrew has said he can combine that with several other agenda items, and he suggested to me before this meeting started, while we were still on Zoom, that we move to the next item, which is the update from Kevin Miller about the archaeological dig. If that's all right with everyone? If Kevin would care to speak on that first?
Okay, by me, thank you, Marguerite. Well, I think as most everybody knows, the dig by Greg Walwer and ACS began the week before Labor Day weekend, in the latter half of the week. And during that period, he was doing the shovel tests at intervals, largely to the in the proposed park area to the north, and then also to the east along the library side of the boundary, the old burial ground. And then after Labor Day, or the week of Labor Day, again later in the week, there were several days of work with heavy equipment, which involved systematic sort of scraping down of layers of soil, very tightly orchestrated by Greg on site, in an effort to, make a determination as to what was there. At this point, and the work, as that initial work is all now complete, both the shovel tests and the scraping with the heavy equipment. He has not found, or they have not found, him and his team have not found any evidence of remains. What they did find are artifacts of various types. And, I was down to the site several times. I went there the morning of the opening day just to shake his hand and wish him well, and, offer whatever services we could. I also stopped by, I believe later that first day, with Dan Blanchard had previously turned over to me for safekeeping the artifacts that he had, as you know, picked up around the site in previous months. And so I went down the end of the first day and showed those to Greg. And he found it very interesting. He wanted to see them, and was able to identify different shards of pottery and so on, in a way that was actually consistent with Dan's earlier identification of what those pieces were. So that was quite interesting, and he enjoyed seeing that, and he found it helpful. Otherwise, I tried to leave him be and to get about his business. So in the second week, when he was scraping, I was again down there and spoke to him, and we walked the site briefly, and he updated me on what was going on. And I, earlier this week on Tuesday, I had a fairly extended conference call with Dan and with Rob Kuklovich, who's been the point person at St. Mark's on the project. And
with Dan, or excuse me, Dan or Greg?
Greg Walwer of ACS and Rob Kuklovich, the CFO of St. Mark's, who's been sort of the lead person at St. Mark's on the project. And we kind of went over, and it was good for us all to be together to hear Greg explain again what his findings were to this point. So again, no remains, which I think is good news. And so people can relax a little bit on that point. It must be said that doesn't mean that Greg is saying that there are no burials outside the walls. What he's saying is his obligation was to investigate the areas that were going to be subject to construction, which is what he did. And so, for instance, they didn't go into that copse of trees that remains just to outside the walls of the burial ground, because there was no need to investigate that. The plan for it is to remain undisturbed. However, you know, so there's good news on the remains part of it. The slight hitch in this is that he said there were 3 areas of what he described as red flags. And that had to do with the presence of artifacts or what he described as a debris field and possible and structures. One of which was actually fairly close to Freddie's pollinator garden, and that's shown on an 1898 map. His feeling was that that structure is not particularly significant, but nonetheless it's there, and he is obliged to report it to the Mass Historical Commission. The second area of concern was there's a foundation to the north in the park area that actually has a concrete pad at the very base of it and had mortared stones and some brick in that area. And I had, that had been a pretty obvious one to see from the beginning. And I did call it to Greg's attention. And by the way, when I was there, he already had a mark with the spray paint they marked the turf with to dig right in the center of that. So I wasn't telling him anything he actually already didn't know. And he indicated that also wasn't particularly an aged structure. He felt it was likely very late 19th or possibly early 20th century. But it was a second point that he is obliged to report to MHC. The third area was what he described as a debris field, more toward the center actually of the proposed park area. And that is currently marked off, as I understand it, with a sort of tight ring of flags. So he indicated both to me and to Rob Kuklavich that his recommendation, based on his findings, was that no further investigation was warranted or need occur. And I remind everybody that the mandate for this dig was not an academic one to uncover, for instance, every last shard of pottery in the area. It was to confirm or deny or to ascertain whether or not there were any unmarked burials there, whether native, colonial, or otherwise. And again, you know, he's cleared the area with regard to burials. However, because there are areas of concern with these, what he describes as post-Civil War structures and some possible debris, he felt obliged to let let Rob and I both know that MHC could come back with the demand for further investigation. You know, so that was a bit of a surprise. And what he said was, you know, the timeline he gave us both was up to 30 days for him to prepare this report for MHC. And apparently their requirements are quite comprehensive, you know, quite extensive, and up to 30 days for them to reply to that report. When MHC replies to that report, if they agree with Greg's findings and recommendations, it's over. However, you know, he was obliged to allow for the fact that they could come back. And the scenario he gave to us was, you know, he said, well, you know, the MHC could say that based on the fact that this is one of the oldest private schools in the country, and that these are historical artifacts or potential foundations. As you know, the library is built on ground that was donated by Joseph Burnett's family to the town, that they may come back and require it. He felt it was unlikely. He said his best guess was that, you know, we were on the downslope here. But again, so I tried to pin him down, and I said, okay, give me your best guess on the timeline, because I know everybody in the town is sort of itching to move forward. at the barest of bare minimum, 30 to 45 days, possibly as many as 60. And that was as of, Monday or Tuesday when we spoke. So it's, from the standpoint of us having clarity about, interments, I think we should all feel pretty good. Unfortunately, there's still some time to run on the clock, so to speak, with this, which I know, is a little bit disappointing. The last thing I want to say about this is that I feel like there was there were, without getting into the weeds on this, so to speak, or into the dirt, there were some problems, I think, that came up during the dig in terms of communication and who knew what in the town and all that sort of stuff, and things between the why is he digging here and why is he digging there? And I think it was an issue that was compounded by the fact that this is a rather unique sort of public-private partnership where you have the employers of Greg Walwer is the private school. But part of the dig took place on, not only in the triangle area, which is, subject to debate about ownership and rights and all that stuff, which I don't want to get into, but there was also digging done on town property adjacent to the library, which I think was a challenge for a couple of days. But the good news is that it's done. They did it very respectfully and sensitively. I don't believe there was any damage, for instance, to trees or tree roots. And we've gotten the answers that we sought. So that's good news. And I just also want to say that throughout this process, I regard Greg Walwer and ACS as absolute consummate professionals. And I've been deeply involved in following every aspect of this. And I am fully satisfied, as chair of historical, that it's been done right, it's been done comprehensively, and it was done responsibly. And if he says that there are no interments there, I personally am satisfied. And then I defer to the professional authority of the full-time employees of MHC and the state archaeologists to determine whether or not his recommendation that we've done enough is satisfactory or not, because I lack the expertise to make that judgment call. But insofar as dealing with Greg Walwer, he was forthright, forthcoming, a pleasure to deal with, and same goes for Rob Kuklovich at St. Mark's. This has been a very productive relationship, and I can't say enough about either gentleman, and frankly, their forthcomingness, with information about, and I think some of the stuff that was going on between St. Mark's and Greg and the DPW, it got maybe a little bit lost, and people weren't aware of what was going to happen. It was a surprise to me, for instance, when they were using the heavy equipment on the library property itself, because I didn't anticipate that. But I will say that also that Greg was obliged to go where the evidence was leading him. And so, for instance, as many of you know, they excavated actually on the other side of the laid out new roadway, way up at the point of the what would be St. Mark's parking lot at the intersection of 85 and St. Mark Street. Why? They weren't planning to go there, but they went there because the evidence was leading them in that direction. And the responsible thing to do from the standpoint of the dig was to go there. And so they just did. So it was one of the reasons why I feel, quite strongly that the right thing has been done in the right way. And I have the highest respect for Greg's professionalism and expertise. And so I think, the timing is I know a bit of a drag for some folks here, but I think the results are something we'll be able to feel good about. So I'm sorry that took as long as it did.
No, thank you. That was all excellent information. Do I have any questions from members of the working group? No? All right, good, thank you. That is good news to know. There's one other thing that you mentioned, Kevin, which was by the time the report comes in and we're absolutely sure that it'll be what, early November?
It could be mid-November, and
Mhm.
I listen, I'm no expert on paving. You know, from that the DPW head here, that might be helpful. But as I understand it, it gets problematic when you get into the late fall, and I think this may affect, you know, timing, planning, and may slow it down, unfortunately. And it is what it is, you know. But again, I consider this all a positive step.
Good, definitely so, and it does affect the timing and probably the rest of what we're going to talk about tonight, which is, I think, Andrew, can you talk to several items, actually, one of which is the update concerning the charge of the working group? And you said you would like to actually combine several of the agenda items that you were involved with.
Sure, I really just have one kind of overarching idea
All right.
that I wanted to put out there based on thinking that I've done and, you know, the information that Kevin just related and some discussions with people I've had, which is that, you know, our charge was to have a recommendation to the select board by the end of September. I don't feel like, and there's a select board meeting on September 20th. I don't feel like we had people missing here, and I don't feel like we can make such a recommendation today. But what I was going to suggest is that, I thought that am I right that the last meeting we had was the last meeting we had with Mr. Klugman, or do we have a meeting after that?
Okay, I have down that August 25th involved him.
Yes, and then,
Yes.
okay. So, at that point, we just kind of based also on the select board meeting about whether to approve the money for Michael's work. I felt like we should just kind of hit the pause button to see what happened while the archaeological dig was happening. At this point, and another thing that people spoke to at the select board meeting was public forum. So I thought that if, all three designs that Michael had put forward, there was a feeling that they were all bad, then that would lead in one direction. I thought they all had some potential. So my idea is to, if the working group could, have at least one more meeting, which is just focused on, we started to do it, we had our initial reactions of these designs. Are there ones which are more preferable than others? Or also are there people that you don't like any of them? I think they all had, again, they're just models, but I thought they all had some very attractive features. And I think that if we had a next meeting that focused on a group discussion about, is there one or maybe two of those designs where there could be a consensus around it, and then to schedule a public forum, late September, early October, which is really just dedicated just to hearing feedback from people about what do you think about this design. Now, I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about is the design really has reflected the ideas of this working group, which is really more interested in I think Michael put it well. There's an emphasis on historical and ecological aspects of the design features. I mean, I also have heard people say they thought there should be much more active recreation space there. We haven't even really considered that, just because I think it's the right decision. It's so close to the old burial ground. Given its historical importance, that's the type of park that should be. But anyway, so, you know, at this public forum, people might have, I really have no idea what the public feedback would be. But I think it's important to hear that out. You know, also, this is, you know, another group that met for a long time, had in some ways a difficult charge, some different, but the, you know, the noise bylaw committee last year that also met, and once they came to something they thought was a tentative recommendation, they also had a public forum. Sometimes it draws more attendance, sometimes it doesn't, but that I think would be the most productive way to go forward. And again, also, for those of us that have been there from the beginning, you know, we started in February, right? We had kind of this phase one that was through the first meeting that really came up with the dig question, the town meeting vote, the expansion of the charge. And now I feel like that was in late June. I feel like we are coming towards the end of being able to meet our charge. You know, we just can't meet. At a certain point, I think people start to tire of meetings. We probably had that at like a 12 mark now, you know? So that's how I see as a way where we could kind of, you know, get to fulfilling the charge.
Comments from working group members? Bill. And also Freddie, then Bill, then Freddie. How's that?
All right, there's we have been presented with 3 plans for the park. I'd like to point out that I don't think that they are mutually exclusive one for the other. In other words, you don't have to select one or the other. You can combine elements of a park and achieve consensus in that context, number one. So there's that issue I think we'll probably have to deal with. The second thing is I'm not sure that revelational park concerning only historical issues are what we derived a consensus at. My understanding was that we wanted to have an element of this park that would promote active engagement with the public so that they could justify any expenditures that they were going to incur on this park. We wanted it to be useful. We wanted it to be adjacent to the town center. We wanted it to increase walkability within that whole area, for example, as well as display elements that might be historical. But we also had issues concerning whether the library or anyone else might want to have small programs or something else of that nature so that we could have presentations in that park area. So I just wanted to raise what I thought was that consensus. I could be very well wrong in that area. But that's, I guess, about the only comment that I would basically have. Aside from the fact that I think it's important that this committee come up with a recommendation. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be changed. Engineering issues associated with it can cause that change to occur. But whatever we come up with doesn't necessarily have to be put in stone. But it does represent something that we have to put a stake in the ground in, because I thought that's what the Board of Selectmen wanted us to do. Come up with something that looked reasonable so that we could proceed with the park. There's a third issue that I haven't heard a report on, and that is what is, in fact, is there going to be an agreement between St. Mark's and the town concerning the ownership of that property? And that is outside of our scope, but it may very well include or preclude the development of the park itself, I would guess. But that's not our issue at this stage of the game. Done.
Okay, thank you. Freddie?
Hi, as far as the components of the park, I would say another major component from the get-go was to have an ecological landscaping, native plants, focused on pollinators, but not just pollinator gardens. But I would say my opinion, and I stated it last meeting, this working group, when I got on, when the charge was expanded, it's very clear they wanted public input. And to date, we have not done that. And I am opposed to moving any further, reviewing any plans until we do that. I think we should have a public forum and plan that the rest of this meeting. And if we need another meeting to go, how we would do that. And I'm saying this because as an open space commissioner on the Open Space Preservation Commission for almost 20 years, I've been involved in 2 open space and recreation plans. And I know that I knew from the get-go what I thought should be in that plan. And my commission could have met, and I could have met with other stakeholders in small groups and decided what we wanted. But the first requirement was to do surveys and public outreach. And even though maybe the end result was very close to what I thought we should have, there were changes that were made because we were able to get input from voices and opinions that I wouldn't have been listening to if we hadn't done the public forums. And I think we will waste more of our time if we try to narrow it down and then present that. And then what if we hear from people that we're totally off base? Then what are you doing? So as I said, when I first got on here, I thought we should start with a wide open white space. We now have some plans that I think, and I find that there's a lot of good in all of them. And I could sit down with this committee and come up with what I think we should put forth. But I think the real job of this committee, a working group, is to get input from the public. Maybe no one will come. Maybe it will be liking what we already have, but we won't know that till we do it. And I don't think we should spend more time trying to finalize anything to present before we've had any input, because we really haven't. So that's my viewpoint.
Can I make a suggestion, Ben? Well, I don't know. Grant hasn't spoken yet. If anyone else wants to.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew, and everyone. I agree that I think a public forum, well, first of all, it's in our charge, so I think that we should do it. I know there's some confusion about the last meeting, whether or not that was technically a public forum. We definitely had more public participation than usual, but regardless, I don't think it hurts to do 3 more public forums as stated in our charge. I would definitely be looking forward to getting the first one of those, as soon as possible, our next scheduled meeting. Have that be an incorporated element of it, or have the meetings, the meeting would be the forum, I guess, is how that would work. But yes, I think it would be a positive step, and we might get some new input that could alter our conceptions of the park. As for the consolidating around the final design, I think that I agree that Mr. Clutchman's designs were very helpful, and I think it really helped us all to visualize them actually on paper rather than just talking about them as ideas. So I think it was really good for advancing things forward on that front. I do think that there are some aspects that to any of the plans really would need to be revised, and there are also some outstanding issues that I'm aware of. I attended the planning board meeting on Monday in which they were talking about the scenic stone wall removal that was on the property, which I found quite interesting, and how they might be interested in potentially restoring the stone wall to its original form. They didn't agree on that, but they were talking about it, which I thought was, that would have impacts for the design. And so there are some outstanding issues that I think that kind of preclude us from actually achieving a final design at this point. But I do agree that moving forward with a public forum is a great idea, and I think that we should schedule our first one right away.
Okay, other comments?
Can I just say, Marguerite, that I agree about public forum. I would like to do that, similar to Grant and Freddie, prior to presenting a plan that we endorse. Although like Andrew, I see that there's merits in all three of those plans that have been presented to us thus far. I'd like to get the input before we go forward.
Freddie, question for you. What the other two projects that you did that had public forums, which were they?
I've done many projects with public forums, but the two I was referencing was the open space and recreation plan, where we presented, you know, what people wanted. It's different than doing a park plan. I also was involved in the public forums for the, we had public forums for a concept plan way back when for Breakneck Hill, when we did the clear cut of the Oriental Bittersweet to do that restoration, which was a major project for many years.
Mm-hmm.
We also had one for the park down at down by Southville and Route 85. That was the original Triangle Park.
Right.
The open space and rec plans that I was significantly involved in, and your recent master plan even had it. You can't make decisions of what the people want, in my opinion, until you let the people tell you what they want, even if it's not what you necessarily want to hear. But I think you need to know that sooner rather than later. And I think one of the ways we did our the open space and rec plan is, you know, even the housing plan. I don't know about the most recent one, but the one before that I was involved in, we had charrettes. I was involved in planning for Hudson when they were talking about how to revitalize that. This was a regional group. So always have these public forums, and one of the ways they do it is they have, and with COVID now, I don't know, Zoom isn't as easy to do this, but they start out and they have like tables with the plans on it, and people go and they can circle or put stickies on what they like, what they don't like, you know, have the 3 different plans, discuss them, have different people, and then you gather those together afterwards and see where there was consensus, where there was, you know, you can also have a board where people write down things that aren't there, what they want. And I remember the master plan, when they did that, they had different components of the master plan. This was MAPC led that one.
Mm-hmm.
And people put stickies up. Did they like this? Did they not like this? Which things did they think were most important? And that's why I think it takes plan. You don't just, in my opinion and my experience, you don't just say, oh, this is a public forum, what do you think? You have to plan, what are you presenting? Who's going to facilitate? And how are you going to encourage people to attend? And then when they're there, you can't just say, okay, here we are. You have to have a plan. You know, you need someone who's going to run through the information and help us or choose one of us to do so. So, I mean, I've been to a lot of them, and there's a pretty standard process to allow people to participate.
I was involved in part of the master plan in the early, maybe 6 months of it. And I think that the goal of the master plan was admirable. It was a huge undertaking, and it ended up with a document. I am just leery of, and I'm doing this as devil's advocate, where you have planning by committee, and where someone who's expert in this can step in, not as a town resident, and say this or that will not work. That's what I would like to keep the expert side of this, not simply have it be what people would like. I think case in point is the Southville Park, which is too dark.
So I will say something about the Southfield Park, which I went to all those meetings.
Yep,
I was one of many.
yep.
Did not end up how I wanted it,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean it didn't end up how the people wanted it, or
Well,
everyone
but the
who was
people aren't
involved.
using it. That's the thing.
So that is, I would say that is one case, and that also could have, if we want, if the town so wanted, and I think this has brought some attention to it, there are
Mhm.
things that could mitigate that. Some of it is, what I always felt is there were too many trees and it's too dark and the shrubs are too tall. There are things we could do today to limit up, do some landscaping improvements, maybe trim down the shrubs. But what I'm talking about for what you just said, I kind of didn't understand. You said you don't want the experts to be running it, but you don't want to take input from people who don't know what they're talking about, like the citizens. But
No, that's not what I said. I am, and if I can cite Michael Kletchman without him being here, he said the juniper bushes in the Southfield Park, which he went to look at, the juniper bushes were a lot of the problem there because they created a sense that you couldn't see what was going on inside the park. Now, that's something that an expert can look at and see. I'm just leery of design by committee where we create something or something is created which doesn't work because it doesn't have enough expert input.
so I wasn't saying we designed it or that the public in the public forum designs it.
Mm-hmm.
You have professionals, you have professional plans. And actually the Fayetteville, the Southfield Road one also had consultants that worked on it.
Mm-hmm.
What I said, you decide who's going to facilitate. That would require who's going to facilitate, someone who knows what they're doing, right? And you're taking input from the public. You're not saying they design it, but we haven't heard what people want. How do they want to use it? Then that's when you bring in the VHB or other consultant or designers to say, this is how you get from this desire to the end result. But so far, and I'm saying this with great respect for the many, many hours and meetings the members of this working group have spent on this,
Mm-hmm.
it's been a self-selected small group. And yes, there's a lot of expertise here. We have historical library, ADA, Selectmen, Open Space Commission, Historical Commission. So you have varied viewpoints, but we haven't heard from the whole town. And I think you need to have that possibility before you move further. How
All
you
right,
want
and
to
at
facilitate
this,
it.
yeah, and at this point, the only circumstance in which we've heard from the whole town was town meeting, where there was a lot of negative feeling about the ownership of the park and the amount of money that would be spent on to do this.
That was
on something
that was not public input on the park.
Well, it sort of is.
Then why are we here?
Can I make a suggestion? Sorry to.
Yes, go for it, Andrew.
Sure. So just to what Freddie was saying and some other people, let me lower my hand first. I don't agree with the idea of, like the pre-meeting we had with Michael Klukman, and then I think we had 2 meetings with him, right? First, where he
Yes.
heard ideas from the group, then
Mhm.
when he came up with the plans. I don't agree with like starting over from scratch and having some other process, but I also agree that it sounded like people don't want to first have this group coalesce around 1 or 2 of the designs and then present that at a public forum, but instead to have it something that's a little bit more open. I think that there's got to be, to make it productive, there should be some proposed designs at the public forum. I think the idea of having someone to help facilitate it is good. Mr. Klukman is someone who could possibly do it, but if he was to do it, I would want to kind of alert other members of the select board before inviting him back. And, like the difference, there's not a clear answer. What's the difference between a public forum and a public meeting? I mean, legally, there's a difference between a public hearing and a public meeting. Public forum, I think if it's really something where if you were someone who didn't frequently turn into meetings like this, you could just zoom in and you wouldn't watch, approval of minutes, routine meeting stuff, you could be able in a focused time period to, there would be a, 5-10 minute background. So this is how we got to where we are. This is what it's about. This is where we are. We're interested in your feedback. What do you think? It could also be in person. We've met only in Zoom. We could have a in-person meeting where Freddie, people could do the things that you suggested, and you could have it with the OWL, which makes it so you could have hybrid participation, so someone could Zoom in. I do think, though, it would be like, we still haven't had a meeting where we've really, all of us have said, like, what do we think about the 3 different designs? I'd be interested in hearing, even if we go into the public forum, it doesn't exclude anything. I would be interested of, first off, it was a while back, so I don't remember what everyone's initial reaction was, but so bottom line, I still think the idea of having a meeting where first, it could be advertised as a public forum too. I think that one of the differences is just that to advertise something as a public forum to get more people, like with the last one, I worked with someone from the townhouse staff to put something on the banner of the website. We could also then tell Beth Mello, ask her to publicize it, and that might get more people. And then, we certainly hope the comments are really design focused. If they're questions about other aspects of this, then we'll kind of deal with them as they come up.
Okay, so, but
That's the
Andrew,
real difference, right? Is
part of the thing about, I thought all the design, for the record, I thought all the designs were excellent, but I think some of the questions about moving forward with the design are, some versions of each design were more and less expensive than other versions. You could do an inexpensive version of one design or a high expense version of each design. And to me, if I'm making the selection, it has to do with how much is it going to cost the town every year and who's going to keep it up. And that goes again to issues of what Grant was talking about, which is the selection should be influenced by how much it will cost to put it in and how much it will cost to keep it up. Don't you think?
yes, but okay, ultimately, one of the questions is, if there's a new design, does this need to go out to bid again? And this group is not going to have an answer to that anytime. I think the charge is to make a recommendation about what the design should look like. Another thing, Michael Klukman said is, one of my first questions was, what are some of these more expensive than others? And he mentioned, if there's a bid for one of them and it comes in more than you want, you could tweak it, reduce the size of the gathering space so there would be less of this type of material, etc. I think that part of it is something that's probably down the road. I think the first part of the forum is just kind of like, what should the park look like? What should be the design of it? What should be the theme of it? What do you think of these proposals? I definitely, at this forum, we should set the stage about what we did, how there were all these meetings, the information which was collected, the background of the dig, etc. So that it's not just like 3 people randomly came up with these ideas, in like a 1-hour meeting, that there was a whole process that led to it.
Can I jump in just because I
Sure,
agree with a
Freddie.
lot of what you both have been saying, and just to clarify what I was trying to suggest. One, that's why you have somebody who's in charge of running the meeting. And that they're going to present all the, the lead in, the information. And then with the different plans, why I don't think we should, there might be components that people, the public forum, if we go and pick one, just say, right, or 2, that other people might say, I like, we could there could be a lot of people who like one component that we don't see it. And then we're not creating the actual design in my mind, right? We're giving the concept. These are the themes or the attributes of this plan that we think the townspeople want and that we recommend based on the use and how the design fits the different uses and how the people feel they would use it and what they like. And then when it goes out to money and bid, or, you know, materials and, you know, if it has to get tweaked, that's after the fact. The first thing is, what are we presenting? And I'm not thinking that we're going to I'm thinking take the 3 plans we have. They're 3 pretty good plans. If we can get VHB to be the facilitator there, I bet they have some experience in this. You could put what I've experienced in the past with what they call the charrettes. They put the plans down and people can go, you know, you have a big scale one, and the public safety meeting room, which has windows that open, is a really good facility for this sort of thing. You meet around the tables, people can go in groups and you move, you know, have, you know, 3 different groups, say, you get, you know, the different plans and you can each talk at that group. You have someone who's going to take notes, stickies, discussion. And the difference between a public forum, and this is what I was trying to say at the last meeting, there is no legal, this is a public forum, not a public forum, right? I know there's hearings and meetings. All of our meetings are public, but the concept behind a public forum is, I found out that our meeting was a public forum like the night when I saw it on the agenda or the day before. That's, to me, not how you get the word out. And having a banner on the town's website if you didn't go that day, or you spend a good amount of time publicizing it and making sure you invite every committee in town, chair gets one and you invite them to invite their committee members. You know, there's multiple ways besides the blog, the newspaper, Twitter, you know, and then everyone, I know Grant put it out on Facebook, but you know, you do that you have a planned how we're getting the information out that we want, and you let people know, we want your opinion.
Understood. Okay, so what I'm hearing so far is public safety building is a good venue, right? Are we?
Or the library.
Library okay, or the library.
Public safety is windows that open, though. I'm just saying that's
Well,
important.
library's got windows that open, but not a lot of them. And I would say public safety probably has better electronics for making it
Okay.
SAM accessible. I don't know. Okay, so public safety building or library, we can check those out. Any other places that we could do it? I think it needs to be in person. I mean, it can be OWL, although OWL is somewhat successful, not always totally, but I think this is a boots on the ground kind of meeting. Does everybody agree with that?
I think if I may, that we need to I agree with in person is the way to go, but
Right.
make it accessible and allow people to write in or email, because not everyone's going to want to go inside. And I think we need to be
Right.
respectful of
And
that.
it can be after the fact too, like a week after the meeting, still taking public comment. How's that?
And then
Marguerite,
the group
Yes,
meets and goes over it all afterward. You
Grant?
know?
yeah,
Yes?
just 2 quick things. Is there an owl in the public safety building?
It's you can transport it, you can move it.
Oh, okay, great. So
It's like
think
this,
that would be
like this tall.
good. Okay, so I think that would be a good, they have the, you know, projector or the TV or whatever there, so it's
Mhm.
easy to view things, so I think that would be good. And then if I could add a quick comment, I agreed with largely with what Andrew and Freddie said about, you know, having a facilitator for the meeting. I am a bit wary about having VHB actually be the facilitator. I feel like, you know, we have the plans in our possession now, or at least, you know, copies of them, and we can, you know, we could put them on the screen and talk about them. But I feel like we were, you know, unwittingly party to actually, you know, the whole, you know, retroactively spending $7,000 for the plans without, you know, the working group actually necessarily realizing we were spending money. And I feel like if we invite Michael or was it Greg? I can't remember, from VHB to come at our meeting, that they might charge us for that. And You know, I feel like there's been enough controversy with, you know, spending public money on land that isn't ours yet. And so I would be a bit wary about that for now.
So,
So
Greg,
that's what-
I hear you totally with that. I'm just concerned that we would get, if we had a facilitator that was one of us, that there would be glaring things that we wouldn't know that would get in the way of a decent amount of data collection. That's the only thing. My thought was to go back to the select board and say, if VHB facilitates, how much would you consider reasonable to pay for it? But then I go back to my own question is, how much is the town going to spend on a piece of property that we may or may not own? And is this all going to seem premature if we're making these plans and spending this time when we don't know what the town will own or what they will have for responsibilities for it? Just my thoughts.
Kevin has his hand raised.
Kevin,
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in to say that I would like someone other than VHB to moderate such a forum, and that's with all respect to their plans. You know, one thing about the plans we've seen from VHB, you know, they work very hard to try to accommodate our various wish lists that we had presented them. But my observation about the plans that we've seen thus far is that they're all sort of variations on the same theme, you know, winding path, trees, a bench, a spot for flowers, which is all lovely, and it's going to give us the generic park that we will then deserve. But you know, and it might be a lovely but generic park. And what I worry about a little bit is that what I'd like to come forward with and have input from the public on is some kind of real vision. And I held back because I felt that if, you know, if the archaeological dig had revealed the presence of remains, in my view, it was game over, and it was time to figure out how to treat that land as the sacred ground it would have been determined to be. If that doesn't appear to be in the cards, I still think that a very strong conception is going to yield us a strong park. And I, for instance, still am very much in favor of a very light footprint, something very green, leafy, filled with plants, a peaceful place. But I don't necessarily think it needs a lot of features, quite frankly, unless there's a call that, you know, the townspeople call for that. And I certainly very, very strongly oppose active recreation purpose in that park.
and you may get calls for that.
And if we do, I'm overridden. I'm just one vote, you know, on a working group. But I would present the fact that, you know, and I don't, the part of the problem is with this is that I don't hear any sort of screaming desire coming out of the community for any particular purpose to this park, which, you know, inclines me to think of some of the most pleasant spaces that I can think of are the ones that are just simply green and left alone. And they're happy places you can go sit and, you know, listen to the wind in the trees kind of thing, that they don't necessarily need a bunch of elaborate winding paths and carved incised stones and, you know, all kinds of other stuff. There is, not to sound like I'm beating the historical drum, but there is, you know, obviously some historic significance there, and it would be nice to mark it. But I personally still lean toward the idea of a very passive space, and possibly some gesture toward, again, in spite of the absence of interments, a place to mark and commemorate people that, you know, history has forgotten in the town, or that we know that there are a great many unmarked graves in town. Where they are, we don't know. But it could be a very sort of a kind of reflective, peaceful space that in the absence of a demand for some kind of specifically oriented park, we could go with a very light hand and at a relatively low cost to the town rather than building a lot. But
And
again, this
the
I-
original concept was for a playground in the middle of it.
right,
So
which
I-
I think would have been a disaster, quite frankly. But I just go back to the idea, and then I'll withdraw to say that I very much support the idea of a forum. I hope that someone other than VHB can moderate it, not because I distrust VHB, but because I think if there's a sentiment toward their designs, it will be made all the more strong by the fact that it was moderated by someone who's good at leading charrettes and who's done this before. I mean, they're out there. And if we're going to pay one, we might as well pay someone impartial to do this. And who has some broader vision and get the input from the public and see if actually a compelling concept emerges. Because I feel, personally, I feel to some degree I'm failing personally to bring that to the table, except insofar as that I'd like something low key, gentle, quiet, and very green. So
that is a huge demand. You may get from the charrettes that what is wanted is another half a soccer field.
and if that's what the town wants, I defer. I would resist it and try to argue passionately against it, but I'm just one vote. So
Can I
Well,
say, we
thank
have
you.
an open
Freddie.
space and rec plan, and some of the concepts that are being discussed here have never been listed as a desire of the townspeople, and we did extensive surveys and public forums, but we had surveys that we were very specific about making sure lots of people had access to them, right? So there was never a desire for a park downtown that you could do active recreation. There's better places in town for that we could look at the actual open space and rec plan to find out where those are. Just because you have this new opportunity to use this land doesn't mean you put stuff in there that isn't something that really makes sense there. And Kevin, I couldn't agree with you more on your concept of peaceful large green. And I think many members of this committee have said that. And basically, if I got that plan, there are components of all the different plans I like, but I have found out that, what's that saying, less is more. And I'm really, really happy that they put the heritage trees in, and that this committee so far, the working group, has been amenable to that concept, because again, I was in Concord the other day, and right in a real busy intersection, there was this very simple park. It had some historical markers. It's a very busy walking by, and cars and tour buses. And there were people sitting in the park on it. Was a simple slab bench. Somebody was doing watercolor paintings. People were sitting together talking. There was no big activity, but it was just really in that busy intersection. It was calming just to walk by and see it.
So how did Concord come up with this park design?
I don't know, it could have been there since the colonial days. I have no idea, but I'm just saying, when you see those, you can see that a wide open green space can have a lot of energy.
Of course, I
strong.
think, Freddie, I totally agree with you, and Kevin, totally. My idea of the worst thing is to have a volleyball court anywhere near that, and I'm just concerned because I'm concerned that people who think that we need more recreational space may want something else. That's my only concern with throwing it open to public meeting. If I'm wrong, that'll be great. But
Can I say
Marguerite,
one
if I
thing?
may.
yes,
Oh.
Sorry,
Grant,
Grant, go ahead.
please.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. It's hard on the phone. I couldn't tell that I was interrupting you, Freddie. Sorry about that. Yeah, it just seems to me like we're straying a bit into like our personal preferences for the design aspect, where I thought we were actually on the format for public forums with resident,
Mhm.
part of the agenda. So it seemed like there was agreement. We do want a public forum. We want ample time, ample notice for the residents. I don't know if that's 1 week, 2 weeks, but whatever it is, we should agree on a date and post it, tomorrow. Just so people have plenty of time. It seemed like the public safety facility with the owl was a good idea. So I think in terms of me for this agenda item, it seems like we need to figure out who among us or who outside of us, if we decide to, will be facilitating. Will it be all of us facilitating? Or and how do we want this to run? Do we want to segment it by topic? Do we want to say the first half hour is on, park design, and the second half hour is whatever, general thoughts on, what people want there, or, we can do it as we want it, but I feel like we should try to get a general sense of how it will flow.
Okay, so that is good. Do we want an outside person to facilitate? I think if it's any one of us, it's going to be seen as that entity's event. So I think we should not use any one of us.
Agree.
So just the reason why I brought up whether VHB, what role VHB should have in this, if any, was just so that I would have an opportunity before the select board meeting on the 20th to, if people wanted Michael Klugman to come back, so that I would just clear it with the select before it happened. So it sounded like several people don't think that, for example, Michael Klugman should be the facilitator. I'm fine with that, but just one question I wanted to put to the group is, do you think that he should be invited to participate, even if it's just remotely, so that, for example, if there's a question about what type of tree would be best here, how does something that's really a landscape design question that none of us really have expertise in, would you want someone to be available to answer a question like that, or instead not have that, instead just gather questions and then you can relay them back afterwards?
To
I
me,
don't think
I
we're
think
that
having him
detailed.
there. What?
I don't think we're at the level of what kind of tree do you want? I mean, weren't we talking about, this is a concept plan that we're presenting? The actual design, we won't know what the budget is, so you won't know what kind of tree.
It was just really an example I was throwing out there. Sorry.
But I would also say, to your point about letting the selectmen know, if you're having someone to facilitate, unless we have a town employee that is, people are professional facilitators because they know how to do it. And if you've been to a charrette run by a good facilitator versus one not so good, it's a big difference in the information you're able to get and how you're able to run the meeting. So I think, with all respect to Grant saying, like, let's just publicize it till we know what we're presenting and how we're running it, I think you need to be able to plan that. That's all. So it could be going to the selectmen, Andrew, and asking, is there any funding to hire a facilitator, or who could we hire for? I don't know facilitators. I know we had a great one for the a couple years ago. She did the housing production plan, and she does other types of plans as well. And she may be somebody, and I don't know how much they cost, and I don't know what their availability is, but I don't think you're just going to snap your fingers and have a facilitator. unless we
I don't
choose
think
someone.
I don't think we need to hire another like outside person just for this. They need to have some background on this, and I just think that I'm okay with if you want to have someone completely new come in, and maybe it's just find this person who's a volunteer of.
What do we think? Grant, what do you think? Bill, Kevin, what?
If there's a volunteer out there who's willing to, donate 2 hours of their time, that would be great. I don't know, personally, I don't know anyone. But if any of you know someone who you think might be interested, that would be great. I think, I'm not sure if we need to necessarily pay well, actually, I don't think we need to pay someone just for this public forum, but I think it is something that if we have a good plan going into it, that we ourselves could do. But I would also be open to a pro bono or a volunteer facilitator if someone out there exists. Thank you.
I'm starting to think of some people who might be good for it, but
Oh, good.
So, okay, so seeking facilitator, using the public safety building, presenting the designs there for people to look at, probably not using VHB consulting during the forum, or no? Where are we on that?
I mean, I think it'd be helpful to at least invite him, but
Mhm.
Yeah, I think there's merit in having someone from VHB there. Like I said, I was just advocating for, and I actually think the public perception of it would be better if it were an
Me too.
outside.
And the question is, how much would VHB charge for this? And I think we should find out beforehand, right?
Hour or two of their time. But there are an awful lot of architects and urban planners, city planners, landscape architects in the area. Certainly there must be many of them living in Southborough. And there are, I think 8 to 10 colleges and universities in the Boston area with architecture programs, environmental design, BAC, the Boston Architectural College, and everything, BU, Harvard, MIT, they've all got real smart people in this. And I don't know, maybe we could get somebody to take an interest in this and come out and donate a few hours to facilitate this.
To facilitate.
I'm not trying to make it more complicated. I know everybody's wary of it.
No, and I think the optics of any one of us doing it would be poor, because then one of the things about us is that we are from segments who are trying to arrive at something that would cover a large section of what people in town would like.
Well, and I'd like to see this done by someone who has some expertise in doing it,
Yes.
and could help us with that. I mean, I'm not trying to turn this into sort of, community kind of, I'm losing my
No, we've all had long days, but
to try to get, but I think if, I don't, maybe Andrew will come up with someone quick, but somebody who's got, a background, again, in environmental design and architecture or public space planning kind of thing would be lovely, just to have them come in and sort of guide us through what is the process. I mean, Freddie's laid it out, I think, pretty smartly already, but what is the process for collecting this information, and how can we best sort of coalesce behind a concept based on the feedback that we get, which would be really wonderful.
all right. I mean, just the types of people I had in mind, just to be clear, are not people that have background from like the Boston Architectural College. It's just people that are experienced in like helping to facilitate public meetings, in a neutral way. Is that okay? Or
Andrew,
you think someone needs to?
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I think that sounds great, to be honest. If they had a background in, engineering or architecture, that'd be fantastic. But personally, I think we would be fine in which if someone asks a really technical question, which, to be honest, I don't think we're going to get a lot of, but we'll see. Then, we can take note of it. It will be recorded and relay that on. But I think, if you have someone who you think might be willing to actually, be a facilitator and walk us through this and, have a successful public forum, then I think that's the main thing. And I would be willing to go with that.
so the public forum is in presenting these 3 designs and saying, what modifications of these do you want? Or public forum in, do you want a bocce court here?
So Marguerite, first, I think
At what level of park conception are we going in with a public forum?
well,
Maybe
fir-
do you know what I mean?
Well, first, I think that someone should, one of us
Mm-hmm.
should speak for 5 minutes for someone who hasn't been following this, to just provide a background, a summary of the whole complicated process of how we got to where we are. I mean, I feel that I could do it, and I would do it in a kind of a concise way. That's so that it doesn't just begin like you look at these designs and you have no idea where they came from. I agree that the forum should be open to people have other ideas, like a completely different idea about how to use the space, or of a way that you combine some features of the different designs. It should be open, the forum should be open enough to facilitate that, but like I think it should begin with, someone provides, there's a format, and I think at the beginning of the format, there should be some background provided about how we got to this place, right?
Well, if in
The
a
grant,
funny way, at the beginning of the forum, each of us could talk for literally 1 minute about what our input is for the space, and I think it would say it pretty clearly. Don't you? We have accessibility, we have
yeah,
history, we have the
yeah,
library wants a chunk of it, we certainly have open space. I mean, we're all
But-
here.
but don't you think even before that,
Mhm.
someone should speak for 5 minutes? This is why the working group was created in the first place,
Mhm.
right? Just to provide background again, because part of it is to the question that someone else from the public brought, like, why are we even talking about putting a proposed park in this space? And part of it is kind of accidental in that this space was created by the reconstruction of the road, the proposed road, which was put in, that came from the grant, and that was done at the end of 2021. It's like this space has now been created. Now, what do we want to do with it? So I think it's important to just provide the background about how we got to the place where the select board decided to have a working group to talk about ideas about what it should be, et cetera, et cetera. I
Mhm.
mean, or else people might show up and have no idea about the background of it.
I agree, that's important.
agree
because
that a short
otherwise- yeah. Go ahead.
Very short, though.
Yeah, a short presentation I think would be fine and
Okay,
useful.
all
Can
right.
I agree and also throw something in? That, and this is the subject that, we may have some topic later, but I think we all know there's controversy about this project. The working group was charged with a certain specific to provide feedback to the selectmen on what would go in this park. And the assumption is there is a park and it's going there. And I think somehow you have to address the issue that this group and the working group and the public forum is not about discussing should there be a park or who owns the park or how we got there. It's just about our charge and putting those parameters in, which have to be clearly explained but firmly listed. This is not the forum for, do you want a park here? Do you want the road here? Who owns it? All of those are questions beyond what we're working on. And I think if you don't, then we could, and those are, I'm not saying those aren't valid questions and they deserve to be addressed in the proper place, but this committee's not working on that, right? Unless that wasn't what I read in the charge. So I think to be clear on that, saying if is not the right thing to say, but if the park goes in, and it seems more likely now that we have the dig finished, or I shouldn't say finished, but we've moved further along on that aspect. You have to be planning for what's coming next, and that's what we're focused on. And I'm not saying what anyone in this committee believes or doesn't believe about the other questions. It's like we're dealing with that one question. Somehow someone, and if it's you, Andrew, that would be great, needs to set that straight,
Yeah.
to keep the focus. And if you don't bring it up, we'll get waylaid, I believe.
So, and
I agree.
what I could offer to do if, again, I'm volunteering to do this if, I mean, I could put together just like a bullet point summary of exactly what I would say and then circulate it to the group. It couldn't be then discussed, but at the next meeting, if people thought, no, we should, the background of this should also talk about that, fine, but that would be a way of kind of focusing on like putting together a document that sets, the proposed format of the forum. I like the idea as I'm thinking about of a different kind of moderator. And
Could I do something a little bit unorthodox at this point? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who are listening in as attendees. I would like to throw this discussion open to them if any of them would care to speak to this in terms of clarifying what they think would be satisfying and a legitimate way to proceed for a charrette. Anybody want to raise their hand? Sam? Sally? No? Okay, I guess we're on our own, folks.
People know the briar patch when they see it.
I know. Okay, so we need a facilitator. We're going to do a charrette. We want to be careful before we start publicizing it that we have all of our ducks lined up in terms of plans. We don't know whether we want VHB here or not. My question would be, how much would it cost? And how much would another facilitator cost? And I guess that's a select board question. Anything was left
I can
out?
bring that, I can raise that topic with the select board on the
Yes,
20th, okay?
yeah.
So that there's
I-
total clarity about cost and everything like that.
All right. Any other, because it's 8:25, I think.
I'll volunteer that. I mean, I know I'm connected to a good number of Boston area architects as it happens. And I will just, I'm not guaranteeing anything, but I can put out some feelers if there's someone with expertise in this area that would be willing to look at it. That was with the working group sufferance. I'll just put the word out and I will convey it back to you if I get any nibbles.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay,
That's good. Now, any other, I think we've covered everything we have down here. Any public comment? I guess I just sort of asked for that and there wasn't.
Can we go back to the public forum before you move on?
Yes,
I'd like to have a timeline here because we're talking
I
about
agree.
reaching out. Kevin's reaching out. Someone's got to get back to him.
mhm,
Andrew has to speak to the selectmen. I think you mentioned the 20th.
20.
Yep.
Kevin had said that there was a 45 to 60 day before we could start doing stuff. I mean, and then I think I would like us to communicate with the selectmen what we think is reasonable for us to have this. And I think one public forum is enough. I could be wrong, but we're opening it up to public discussion now. You did the last one. I think having one big one. If we had more time, we could have a second one depending on what comes out of the first one, but let's get that under our belt. And then tell the selectmen reasonably, we can have our feedback to you by such and such a date, which has to be after they get the final say on the
Right.
park,
So,
right?
what about, you think we could set a target date for this public forum? And then obviously whoever is the moderator has to be available that date, but do you want to set like a couple different dates for targets of last week of September or first week of October?
So if you're looking at a calendar,
Yep,
today's the 15th.
yep.
I would say we would need a week to finalize plans and then a week to advertise it. 2
I
weeks,
agree.
right? So that's.
That sounds like a
bringing
good
us-
schedule to me.
That's bringing us to the 29th. Does it have to be on a Thursday?
I don't think it has to be. I know I have a shop C meeting on Thursday evening, that evening.
The 29th?
Yeah,
So would if I'm looking at my calendar again, I'm just throwing this out there, October 3rd.
I could do that.
Is that a
For
Monday?
Monday, October 3rd for the forum?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a planning board meeting scheduled that night.
They had
Selectmen-
one this week. So every 2 weeks would be the 26th. So I think it would be an off week for the planning board, if I'm not mistaken.
I think I'm going to try to go to their website because I think they list them all like Concom does. But
Okay.
don't wait for me. I'll get back to you. If we did that, though, that gives you the 20th to talk to the selectman, Andrew.
Yeah,
Gives us a little bit of time to decide more firmly what we want. How to set it up. It also is, you have to have, if you're doing the group tables, you have to be aware we're going to produce big sheets. Someone has to be in charge of that, and I think you need to have someone come and like take minutes, or not minutes, but gather information. And if that's the facilitator, I don't know. Or if each of us stays at a table and does that without providing input, I don't know. But we have to determine that. And it's not a simple 2-second
Okay.
conversation.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress. Recording in progress. Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
so October 3rd, should we also have like a backup date too?
Is that going to be enough time to get a facilitator?
It depends on,
That's
Um,
not very much lead time. It seems quick to me.
Kevin, when's the date, 45 days that they're gonna, I'm looking at that as a parameter.
Well, again,
Tentative, I know.
it's really rough. I mean, you could start counting at minimum 45 days from, Monday, but it's more likely 60. I will say that when Greg Wall was giving me prospective timelines back in June, he said, dig around Labor Day. And of course, he began 3 days before Labor Day and finished 3 days after Labor Day.
Mhm.
So we've been pretty on the money so far. And I was happy to be the bearer of that information because it turned out to be accurate. But I can't guarantee we're going to be right a second time. But he was saying 45 to 60 days for an all clear. So that puts it, into mid-November potentially. I would.
I don't want to go out as far as November.
Oh no, and me, I don't either. I maybe. What about October 6th, which is 3 weeks from tonight? For this.
Okay. Let's see what, if you can, I was thinking about 2 different dates, and then do you want to have a meeting next week maybe where we come back and talk about if anyone's made any progress on finding someone who could be a good moderator, their availability for the 3rd and the 6th. I could also put together my draft little background summary. Just to kick off the discussion of a format would be like Roman numeral 1, welcome. Roman numeral 2, introduction of moderator. 3, background. And then 4, everyone goes around and says their own perspective on it. And then the rest of it is kind of moderator driven, or Freddie's ideas about going into tables and small.
There's
group
There's also
discussions.
the
But-
issue of getting large prints of those park designs.
Townhouse can do
Um,
that.
That's
Okay,
not that hard.
They have a printer down at DPW. I said townhouse, but I think it's at DPW.
all right.
We'd have to ask someone. I'm not telling someone to do that. I don't think that's a big cost. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
That, the master plan meeting was pretty easy. There was a brief discussion to begin with. And then we would just simply invited people to walk around and make comments using Post-it notes on various items, subjects that we put around the room on large pieces of cardboard.
Mhm.
And I think the more difficult component was they had to then take all those various comments down and synthesize that into a report. We received that a few weeks later. But it doesn't require, I think what we have to do is diffuse, based on our previous meeting, diffuse various comments concerning ownership, etc., and focus on simply the park plans. We have 3 of them. There could be a 4th one set up, and people are pretty good at using magic markers to draw. So we could come up with a number of different solutions that give people a general idea of what we're talking about.
Okay, so.
But if
potential dates for
if we get into park purpose, then in fact I think that's when things can get a little dicey, a little diffuse, and because we're asking people to come in with prejudice, with points of view, I should say, and expressing those may not necessarily meld in with what we're trying to do here.
Well, that's,
What are you thinking of, Bill?
Thinking of what? I'm sorry.
What are you thinking of for the ones that won't meld in? I'm sorry, that went by me.
Well, I mean, your concern was a soccer field, a bocce court. I mean, those may be reasonable suggestions. I don't know, but if you get a dozen or so of those various diverse points of view, now it becomes more difficult to try to synthesize those into a relatively small space, which is that area that we're looking at here. It's just more difficult to try to accomplish that if you start at a lower base level.
Right, and I think Rec did approach at the beginning of our meetings with ideas for recreation there. And that's part of what I was thinking of.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, and that may be what some people come in with. My experience has been that there is a large segment of population that has people in schools. Young kids want recreations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that tends to be the driving focus of a lot of planning that goes on in town.
Mhm.
That's why recreation is a very strong component of what you tend to see going on in various plans.
And this would effectively change the space from the way we've been conceiving of it to something entirely different.
Well, I mean, my concern is, I mean, and that's fine if that's the consensus of the population as a whole. But my concern is that we're going to get a diffuse expression of use. And that is going to be difficult for anyone, us or anyone else, to sit down and take all those various Post-it notes and try to justify or include various popular concepts within the park itself. Simply because the people who are going to potentially put those Post-it notes on various park plans, for example, may not have been privileged to understand the extended discussions that we've tried to go through here.
And the other part of it, it will be the number of people who show up at the forum, not necessarily everybody in town. So you may get a certain group that shows up and puts up the Post-it notes, and it doesn't represent everybody in town.
That's
so
right. This may very well be a self-selecting kind of audience that we bring in here.
Well, I mean, I think that's true with any forum, and really it's our job to offer the forum for people to come. If they don't want to come, that's fine. They don't have to, but are free to voice their opinion, even if it's on something that we might disagree with as a group. We should consider it. We don't have to necessarily agree with it. But it's just, I think it's the main point of this is to have a productive conversation in which the public can voice input. Hopefully the input will be useful and will impact our plans or our thinking. But that's really up to us to decide, I think.
Grant, I don't disagree, but my point is that when running a meeting or when running something like this, the whole idea is to come out with a general solution at the other side of that meeting. And the more general and open the meeting is, the more lack of self-direction that is appearing in those meetings, the more difficult it is to come out with a consensus on the other end of the meeting itself.
I agree with that.
And so, in fact, if we put up plans, and we have 3, we could say, what do you agree with or disagree with on that particular plan? People may be able to comment on that. People are better visually than they are conceptually. And so maybe they'll like one plan or the other, and that would be a vote. We should ask them to vote on one plan or the other. We should ask them to vote on, if in fact you decide to vote on that plan, what would you like to see changed? Write it on a Post-it note. Those are the kinds of things that potentially would satisfy or would allow us to come out of the something like this with a consensus.
So in other words, Bill, not what do you want to do on that space, but which of these plans do you think would suit you on this space?
Yeah, I'm afraid we're beyond the first, and I think we're now at the second. And that tends to be, in other words, as a group, what I think either did or should have done is to try to go through this list of things. What do you want to use the park for? Yada, yada, yada.
Right.
And then subsequently, we come up with a design which more or less matches the consensus we have.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're in a position of saying, Mr. Public, what do you believe? Which one do you like? Which one of these 3 or 4 do you like? And subsequently, would you like to see changed within that park plan itself? I mean, we could go so far as to give people a blank sheet of paper and say, if you don't like anything you've seen here, draw it yourself, one of those numbers. And that may be useful too.
My husband, who worked in graphic design for many, many moons and taught it at the museum school, said there was a saying where if you have too many people involved in design, you show them a Ferrari and you leave the meeting with a Nash Rambler.
Oh, there's no question that you end up with less than a sharp consensus.
Yes, exactly.
Question about that. But that's the fact that what you end up with coming out of this meeting is not necessarily what gets presented to the Board of Selectmen.
Uh-huh.
It will be up to us then to take the comments, drawings, whatever we find out of this particular charrette, and synthesize it into something that the Board of Selectmen can agree that would fit into that particular space. In other words, we're not simply just taking everything and tossing it on the table. It's up to us then to subsequently take the material and the information supplied by the public and do something with it to make a consensus out of it, something that we can agree to.
Can I add, as far as the concerns about recreation? They have their own plans they've been working on. They have a master plan. They have participated in the open space and rec plan. They're not attending these meetings and could have or have not reached out to you. They have a department head. I'm not concerned. I think smart people realize that's not a place for active recreation. Are you going to have kids throwing balls that roll into the street that they could chase? I just think that I don't think we need to worry about. And if everyone said it was a great thing for recreation, we should listen to that. And then, you can say, well, it doesn't fit the space. But
because it was originally a recreation space. That was the thing.
But it wasn't recreation that did that. I don't believe.
Exactly.
I've seen recreations plans. You're absolutely right. They're well advanced. And that's probably not the nature of the discussion that we've had here over the last many months. We're not expressing the fact that we want bocce ball or any of these other things there. But it's up to us to go out and try to get some sort of comments. We can, at some point in time, if we get a lot of consensus that people want volleyball courts there, we can say, oh, well, maybe that should be passed over to recreation. And we can have that discussion with recreation if necessary. I mean, if it's just plain out of the question of doing it within that particular space, then I think it certainly is among all the people here in this committee. It's incumbent upon us to say it just won't work. We know that a little bit. Now we can proceed with some of the finer details. And don't forget, there's an engineering design. If you really want to build something like this after the general plan occurs, there will be an engineering design. And that engineering design can have changes made to it, made to the basic architectural plan, simply because there are engineering issues that are not feasible in the plan that we put together. That's the nature of the game. It happens all the time.
Okay, so I think we're winding down after an hour and 45 minutes. Any other thoughts? So far, I think we've summarized. We want a facilitator, not quite sure who. We're going to the board of, or Andrew will go to the Board of Selectmen to okay, possibly paying someone to do that. Is that right?
Let's try to just get some.
Okay, to get someone to do it. All right.
No, for no a volunteer, I really think that.
Yep.
I mean, Andrew could do it. Any one of us could do it because, in my opinion, we're simply just outlining, like, there's a board, there's a board, there's a board. Here's what we'd like you to do.
Yeah.
Here's how we came to this position. Now here's what we'd like you to do.
All right.
What about, I think we could have, like, I mean, I would be available to meet next Thursday to have just a meeting that would, like, the 22nd, that would just come back and, kind of solidify these ideas about the
Okay.
format, right? Format, location,
Mhm.
and then also a plan about advertising it and promoting it,
Do we have a date for it yet?
I thought we talked about two, kind of hold the dates.
The 3rd or
October
the
3rd and the
Monday the
6th.
3rd or Thursday the 6th. Does that work for everybody? Possibles?
I
Yes.
checked, no planning board meeting. Is there a Concom meeting on the 6th?
There is.
So that leaves out conservation commissioners or people who are going to a conservation commission meeting.
Okay, so the 3rd then.
The 3rd, or pick another date. I always
13th.
think it's best not to use.
Third
the
or-
date.
5th,
3rd or
13th.
13th?
What are the days of the week?
The 3rd is a Monday and the 13th is a Thursday.
well, Thursday is fall town meeting. So
Oh, that
13th
would be
is-
good.
Oh.
Well, I don't know.
You're
I
right.
don't know if that's a
Sorry.
good idea.
A public
No.
forum of a different kind.
Boom.
Was that a
Okay.
mic drop?
There are lots of open days that is without holidays specifically in October. So you could go 18th, 25th, 27th. There are those kinds of days too. But
Mhm.
it
Big
pushes
Tuesday is out.
this thing out a little bit, but
Did the 3rd work for everybody? I
Yes,
think that makes
third
sense in terms of.
looks fine if you can get everything done.
That's the
I would
first
venture
day.
to say that you might be better off going after town meeting. Where there's some resolution to the ownership
Yep.
question announced.
Yep. What about the 20th?
That's fine.
Selectmen's meeting, right? Or is that September? Sorry.
Thursday, the 20th?
Thursday.
Of October.
Well, don't we have to have 3 of these? Am I mistaken? I don't see a problem with doing the first one on the 3rd.
yeah.
Can we, I don't think we have to have 3.
It's in the
No.
charge.
If you read the charge,
What?
what this committee has said is that having public comment, even though no one raised their hand at this meeting, you had 2 opportunities for the public to weigh in. I don't know that in the short time frame they gave us that they expected 3 public forums as much as
Well,
this-
here's, if Freddie, yes, and in agreement with that, if we do one and we really do it right, I think that will be enough.
Or we will know that we need another one afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I think one really well advertised and well attended and well organized forum would be sufficient if we and I'm leaning toward doing it after town meeting, frankly.
Fine.
I would lean towards doing it before.
Mhm.
I would as well. I don't see the need for it after town meeting. I think we could have
Okay.
another.
Yeah, there
after
may
town
be no
meeting.
need for it after town.
You could do another one after if there was a need for it, but
All right, so let's aim for the 3rd. How's that? That seems like a doable date.
Okay.
That's Monday, the 3rd of October.
and then do you want to meet next week to just on the 22nd, maybe a short meeting to just try to
And
I
just
think that's a good idea.
entirely discuss that. All right.
yeah.
All right, let's do that. So we'll, next meeting, September 22nd at 7, and working group forum on the 3rd of October, Monday. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Wait a
7
second,
o'clock,
Wait,
22nd.
wait, wait.
Wait, I think
there
Sam
some
has his
other-
hand up.
What also, weren't there some other agenda items? And if we're not going to discuss them, we should table them, I think.
I think there were other agenda items.
There were. Grant, didn't you have one?
I did. I think there were also. Well, James isn't here, so I'm assuming we're tabling that. I'm looking at it
No,
now.
James, we're tabling James the report. He can't, we're tabling that, I told him. We're format for public forum discussion with residents,
That's what we
status
just
of
did.
land ownership. Now that was Grant, I thought you discussed that already. Is there more you'd like to say?
Ugh.
I didn't hear it.
I didn't discuss it actually.
I didn't
Okay,
hear
good, go for it.
Yeah, this
I
is-
think Sam has told me that October 3rd is a select board meeting. Is that? It's a Monday though, right?
That's not
Sam-
gonna work.
Sam has his hand raised.
Yeah, is that what it is?
It's a Monday though.
Yeah,
Should
and
I,
maybe they're meeting before town meeting.
Yeah, excuse me, on the select board agenda, at least upcoming meetings, it says 10-3 for an
Didn't
upcoming
do
meeting,
that.
so I don't know exactly what that
Thank
meeting
you.
is.
Don't you meet in the morning sometimes?
Sometimes, but for special meetings, again, I don't know what that one is, but it's on the list. We should check that.
okay, that is odd.
Andrew, can you check that for us and get back to us for,
Yeah.
we'll reschedule it if necessary on the 22nd.
Yeah, and I also think you can, for scheduling a meeting, we can do that by email too.
Mhm.
Could,
Well, we're meeting on the 22nd. We can figure that out.
Exactly.
exactly.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so Grant,
Sure.
go for it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add this agenda item, really mostly to get a sense of where the working group is at regarding this issue. I've made myself, I think, especially in the last meeting or two, pretty clear on where I stand, but I just wanted to hopefully get a sense from the board, sorry, not the board, the working group. So the way that I had viewed this, the status of the project prior to the dig happening was that in order for me to vote to approve a park, which, you know, I think we have some great design options here, that it would be, I guess you could say, conditional upon the results of the dig, number one. And for me personally, number two, whether or not the town owned the land, or was, you know, yes, whether or not the town owned the land. I know that there have been efforts to acquire it, but obviously nothing firm as of yet. And so where I kind of came down on this, you know, thinking about this over the last few days here, since the dig, you know, I had heard rumors that nothing was found, was, you know, if that proves to be true, that there's nothing there, which it sounds as like perhaps
Likely.
either confirmed or likely. I'm not exactly sure the status, but let's just assume that that's true. You know, where we stand on whether or not you know, the ownership of the parcel, and whether or not our recommendations would be, you know, conditioned upon town ownership of the land. So that's really all I wanted to just bring up as a discussion item. I know some might say that it's kind of outside of our charge, but I think that when it comes to making our recommendation, that our charge is to make a recommendation, and I think that the recommendation, at least in my view, hinges upon it. But of course, you may not feel the same way, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. So thanks.
In my
And-
opinion, this is a
So are you
little-
basically saying that you, if the town doesn't, let me clarify, if the town doesn't own it, then you don't support moving forward with a park design? Is that right? I'm not clear.
Or rather, I would say that, you know, I would, once we agree on a design, I would say the way that I would frame it is, you know, this is design that we want, conditional upon, you know, us actually being able to build it on town property would be the way that I would frame it. But yes, so, you know, it's kind of comes back to this whole 2-track system that we've talked about multiple times. But you know, I think, so my understanding, and I haven't heard any update on this in a few months, so I'm not sure, but maybe Andrew knows a bit more, or Sam in the audience, but my understanding was that Kathy Cook was, chair of the select board, was trying to negotiate some sort of agreement or deal with St. Mark's in order to acquire the parcel through a land swap or some sort of agreement, you know, make sure that it comes into town ownership. And I think if you think about the controversy that this parcel has generated, you know, a lot of it comes down to the ownership of it. And I feel like it's incumbent upon us to, well, at least in my view, you know, make sure that any recommendation we put forward, you know, for a public park is on public property. That's just my view.
Okay, so what I'm seeing is this would possibly be something that the separate members of the working group would vote on, whether some people were comfortable with only town ownership, or some people were comfortable with an easement situation, or some people were, but in other words, you would ask for a vote when we put our recommendation forward to the Board of Selectmen, that we would each be able to vote on whether we were comfortable with the town not owning it outright, and presenting the same way that advisory would do, 3 in favor, 2 against. Do you know what I mean? Where, in other words, our opinion of the ownership of the land would impact our recommendation, but I'm sure, I mean, my sense of it is, I'm going to do a park recommendation, and the ownership, the legal ownership wouldn't impact me that much. I would just say,
Okay.
here's what I would recommend. Do you
Yeah,
see? And so
I wasn't thinking about taking a formal vote tonight or anything like that. You know, it just seemed to me like, so I had these 2 conditions. One of them seems to have been met. One is still outstanding.
Mhm.
I think that, you know, if I was to put forward a recommendation today, it would be, here's the design that we, the working group, want. You know, we think that you should implement this design, you know, after acquiring the parcel through whatever means, or, you know, whatever I don't know the exact mechanism, whether or not it would be easements or ownership, but so that's just, I wasn't asking for a vote tonight. I was just, you know, wanted to.
No, not even tonight, but so you'd put wording into the report that would qualify the design.
I think
qualify the
that's
design?
what I had
Yeah.
been,
Okay.
you know, of course, only if we all agree, you know, if that should be the case. And that's really why I wanted to have this discussion, because I could be the only one thinking that. So,
All right,
Yeah.
other thoughts?
So, I mean, I don't know who's speaking. Sorry.
I think you, Andrew.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. I just think things could change between now and our next meeting, the meeting after that. So I'll just say I hear what you say, but I don't have any official position on that right now.
Okay, and we can have a discussion about it later. It doesn't have to be tonight. So
Yep.
thanks.
All right, other thoughts? No? All right.
I've always felt this was a hypothetical situation. My participation here was
Mhm.
that I participated because if a park is to be built, we didn't know what the dig was going to do, right? And we met and spent our time anyhow.
Mhm.
That if a park was going to be built, that this was an opportunity to provide input to make it the best park that my experience could help provide
Mhm.
input on. And then there's a couple of other things I believe out of our control, right? Which I believe is town meeting. And so I think putting forth a plan of what we think should be there is valid no matter what happens to the land. And that decision's, we get to vote at town meeting, we get to vote. I mean, I believe there's going to have to be an interest in land, in real property needs a town meeting vote. And then I don't know that anyone's going, I don't know where the funding's coming for this, but I don't know that people would support spending tax dollars on land we didn't have an interest in. I mean, maybe I'm too generous in my thoughts, but I kind of think we're smart people and that, crazy things happen, but I'm not that worried about it personally. I think we're putting forth the best possible concept that we can come up with in this time frame, and then whether it gets built or not, that's not really, I don't know if I'm clear on that, but not that I don't have opinions on whether we should own the land or not own the land or lease or, but I
Right.
don't know that that's what I'm participating in here.
Okay,
Can I come in, Marguerite, and just say,
yes, absolutely.
my feelings are very similar to Grant's and Freddie's, and that I'm participating this in the process in good faith and in the belief that the parties concerned are working very diligently toward a resolution with regard to the ownership question, and that our efforts will be greatly assisted by that resolution, which I hope will be forthcoming. But that should we arrive at the end of the process and ready to make a park recommendation without there being a resolution on the table, I think Grant, for instance, is well within his right to ask for a vote on the question of ownership, because this is, let's face it, everybody's operated under some fairly extraordinary circumstances here. This is a highly unusual situation. And so I think everybody involved, I think in this work group, even if from different perspectives, has done it in good faith, in the hope that there'll be a good resolution at the end of the line. But I think it's reasonable for Grant to want to reserve the right to, let's say, work diligently on a good park design, but at the end of the day say no because the question of ownership remained unresolved. But like I said, I'm optimistic that it's going to get resolved, hopefully in short order. So.
Right, okay, good.
I appreciate Grant bringing it up.
Absolutely, and it is sort of the elephant in the room for all of this, and we're all working under a hypothetical that it would be best for all parties concerned in the final resolution, and that we want to see something good on that piece of land, however we get there, which has certainly been a long and interesting process. Bill, do you want to speak to any of this? Or Freddie, you did already.
Yeah, I mean, Freddie, Marguerite, I'm kind of the opinion that we have a responsibility to bring forth a plan. It is the Board of Selectmen's authority to accept that plan and to execute it. The issue of whether in fact the town believes that should be built is not in our segment of that particular chain of events. It's in the Board of Selectmen's area where in fact the chain of events concerning whether it should be built on public or private land occurs. That's all I'm suggesting. In other words, nothing here precludes us from bringing forward a plan that we think the town and we as an organization have discussed this, thinks is appropriate. Get it done, and then let the Board of Selectmen deal with the execution. There will be engineering. I have to point that out also. But once the engineering occurs, the Board of Selectmen takes a look at it. They, as elected representatives, are going to have to decide whether they want to build this park or not, using monies that will be available for one reason or another in one way or another. That's their problem, not ours. Sorry.
No, this is certainly an interesting situation, people. Here, and I thought, okay, so I think we moved along pretty well. We are going to meet on the 22nd to confirm a date for the forum, for the public forum, and also hopefully we will have someone to facilitate by that time, which would be great. Okay. Any other comments, suggestions? No. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion.
Okay, Grant moves to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay.
All right, Bill. All right, and Landry, yes. Ms. Gillespie,
Yes.
Mr. Sines,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
aye.
It's historical would have to say aye, right? That's good. Okay, Grant,
Aye.
Mr. Farrington, Mr. Dennington.
Hi.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. It is 9:06 p.m. and I will see everyone on the 22nd.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you,
everyone.
Marguerite.
Bye.